It's a pleasure to be back in Williamstown, but above all so to celebrate the extraordinarily important work of Mark C. Taylor, who is in fact a fellow theologian. And although this is somewhat disguised in its recent work, I think it's important to understand that Taylor, who's one of our most important contemporary thinkers, is profoundly engaged in the project of bringing forth an ultimate theological meaning from the deepest expressions of the culture of our time. And I sense that too few people appreciate that that's what he's engaged in. I'm concerned in this paper with Vincent van Gogh, who's surely the most important sacred painter of the late modern world, and his impact has been truly universal, thereby establishing Van Gogh as a truly unique artist, but also, and inescapably for us, a unique saint. While sanctity can rarely be recognized in the true artist, it would appear to be undeniable in Van Gogh. Perhaps the most humble of modern artists, yet also the most fiercely independent. Passion dominated Van Gogh, even to the point of madness, self-mutilation, and suicide. For it is the deeply passionate Van Gogh who gave us our greatest self-portraits since Rembrandt, and no other artist has revealed so much about himself in his work. Could we have the first slide, please? Perhaps his eyes are here most self-revealing. And even as he could affirm that he preferred painting eyes to cathedrals, the eyes of his greatest self-portraits unveil a truly new cathedral. Second slide, please. A cathedral of a new world. Third slide, please. A new totality uniting the sacred and the profane, or eternity and the here and now, or flesh and spirit. We can have some light now. Just for a moment, turn away from this. Well, obviously, I'm totally ignorant about how you handle slides. So I'm trying to get never mind. Although Van Gogh is the deepest of modern Calvinists, hey, we don't have to have this continue. What can I do to get you to change it? What do I have to say? I don't know the language. Oh, light. Okay. Jesus. Only that will do it. Van Gogh is also a truly new Catholic artist. Yet here the natural and the supernatural, or nature and grace, are simply indistinguishable, as he called forth not only a truly new nature, but a truly new grace, and a truly embodied grace, one embodied in the depths of body itself. These are the depths which are most openly embodied in Van Gogh's eyes revealing the deepest abyss. But an abyss which is finally a transfiguring abyss, one here not only deeply envisioned, but deeply embodied as well. Van Gogh, and unfortunately I don't think we have a slide of this one, could respond to his last self-portrait painted in Paris as the very face of death. But this is a new face of death, a death which is truly universal and truly unique at once, and one here centered upon the artist's eyes that are a center and a periphery simultaneously, enclosing their viewer within this vision. And if this is a vision of the face of death, this is a face which here becomes our own. Although his artistic art odyssey lasted only a decade and underwent deep transformations, this is an odyssey which can be understood as a voyage to death, and as a voyage to a new death, a death that is a primal or sacred death, and yet one occurring in our own immediate actuality. A genuine encounter with the Van Gogh self-portrait dissolves every true passivity in the face of death. Then, death ceases to be an actuality which one has never known, as death truly becomes our own. But in becoming our own, death as death is transfigured. Then it is present as life itself, a life embodied in these eyes. And if these are eyes of the face of death, these eyes, even thereby, are dazzlingly present. And present not only as the center of this vision, but as the periphery or horizon of a totality of death. But a totality thereby truly embodied, and embodied in these self-portraits. Such an embodiment could only be a transfiguring embodiment. Now, life and death are truly indistinguishable, for death, in being truly embodied, thereby ceases to be death alone, ceases to be a sheer nothingness, and becomes instead an embodied nothingness or an embodied death, and thus a death actually occurring in these self-portraits. As opposed to a Rembrandt self-portrait, the eyes of Van Gogh's self-portraits, are not truly a center of these paintings. Let's look at, I got the order wrong, excuse me. I really don't know how to do this. Not a center of these paintings, or insofar as they are a center, this is a center truly and fully united with its periphery. Here, the canvas as a whole becomes an embodiment of these eyes, and these are eyes which see at every point within this startling new field. For now the eye itself is not only inseparable, but indistinguishable from its horizon of vision. Van Gogh could even be said to have anticipated quantum physics, at least insofar as that revolutionary new physics dissolves the boundary between the observer and the observed. And yet, while quantum physics destroys all possibility of visualization, Van Gogh's mature painting fully envisions a new totality in which subject and object are indistinguishable. And while this had already occurred in Impressionism, this is a revolutionary movement which is not truly fulfilled until Van Gogh, unless it also occurs simultaneously in Cézanne. Just as Renaissance painting anticipated 17th century physics, it is fully possible that modern painting anticipated 20th century physics, and at no point is this so clear as it is in the revolutionary transformations of the subject that here occurs, a subject now truly ceasing to be an interior and individual subject, but that very perishing releases a new totality or a new world, a world only made possible by this suffering, and thus a world inseparable from the disillusioned, truly interior subject. It must never be forgotten that Van Gogh alone, among our great painters, was a preacher of the gospel. But this does not cease when he fully becomes a painter. It becomes profoundly deeper. And while Van Gogh ever more fully distanced himself from all ecclesiastical Christianity, and even could believe in the advent of a new religion, one altogether new and which will have no name, as he declared in a late letter, he surely created an iconography for this new religion, and above also in his final painting, Wheatfield with Crows. Wheatfield with Crows, painted shortly before his suicide, is perhaps his greatest painting, and surely his most purely sacred work. It certainly embodies a new iconography, one in which the traditional icon is truly reversed, as the ecstatic light of this field is inseparable from the dark abyss of these heavens. The very blackness of these crows seemingly resists every fragment of this ecstatic light. And even one another, for just as this field and this sky are inseparable, the crows eyes which see in our ecstatic moment, then the very blackness of the crows captures darkness of death. But now, new eyes which now see the fullness and the finality of death itself. Here, that finality is an ecstatic finality, and one which we actually see. But we do so only with new eyes. And if these are the eyes of Van Gogh, they are eyes that are given us in this painting. Eyes which may be understood as a consummation of Van Gogh's work, but eyes which perhaps impelled that suicide which almost immediately followed the completion of this painting. A suicide seemingly occurring even here, and one which we enact ourselves in fully responding to this painting. Certainly, this is a sanctification of darkness, and the deepest darkness, and the deepest abyss. And precisely thereby, darkness finally becomes indistinguishable from light. And while these crows are darkness and darkness alone, now such darkness becomes light itself. And does so in that ultimate turbulence which is here released. A turbulence which is chaos itself. But now, a truly sanctioned or holy chaos. If the sanctification of evil is the deepest of all of our prohibitions, so too is a genuine sanctification of darkness. And if that occurs in this painting, it does so with a clarity that overwhelms us. For if darkness now is truly light itself, this is a light that is itself indistinguishable from darkness, and is so in the very fullness of vision which is here at hand. Now our eyes not only truly see darkness, but become transfigured in that very seeing. And if this is an ecstatic transfiguration, releasing a truly new joy, This is a joy inseparable from the depths of darkness and abyss. But now abyss is a transfigured abyss. And one transfigured in a truly new seeing. And a seeing in which our eyes become the very eyes of abyss. So that if Van Gogh's eyes are the eyes of the depths of abyss, they are eyes not only in which we actually see the depths of abyss, but see these depths with the very eye of abyss itself. That is an eye which our traditional iconography could know as the very eye of God. But that is an eye of absolute light, whereas this eye is an eye of absolute darkness. But an absolute darkness that here is transfigured into an absolute light. Now, if the eye of God is the deep and ultimate center of all ancient Christian iconography, an eye symbolizing and even embodying an absolute omniscience, and an absolute omniscience which is an absolute omnipotence, this eye is neither abated nor dissolved in Van Gogh's mature painting. It is far rather transfigured, and even absolutely transfigured. And now, there is no distinction whatsoever between the seer and the seeing. Thus, we can see this wheat field as the very body of God. But here, the glory of God is inseparable from the dark and abysmal sky, which is its ground. And the crows are not simply intermediaries between the sky and the field, not simply messengers, whether heavenly or demonic, but enactors of this glory. Enactors who can be understood as the eye, or the eye of God. But now, an eye that is not only an omniscient eye, but a ubiquitous eye. An eye seeing in our own. This is the deep goal and ground of Byzantine iconography, one deeply forbidden or abated in Western Christian iconography. And if it is an Eastern and not a Western iconography that is resurrected by Van Gogh, this is a resurrection inseparable from a deep Protestant or Calvinist ground, an absolutely iconoclastic ground, so that here a pure iconography and a pure iconoclasm are not simply conjoined, but truly united. And united so that each is inseparable and even indistinguishable from the other. Only in Van Gogh does such a fully visual coincidentia oppositorum occur, unless it also occurs in Cézanne. And nowhere else is this occurrence so luminous as it is in Wheatfield with Crows. A painting whose absolute sacrality is indistinguishable from its absolute profanity, or whose absolute light is indistinguishable from absolute darkness. Of course, such a movement is not confined to Van Gogh, for something truly parallel to it universally occurs throughout all genuinely modern art, with the result that all traditional iconography disappears in modern art, and the traditional icon is now only manifest as a pale and empty vessel, one stripped of every power except for a dehumanizing passivity. And even the traditional icons in Van Gogh's paintings can stand forth only insofar as they embody their very opposite. So that here, an absolute transformation of art has occurred, and one whose only apparent parallel occurs in the birth of Christianity. Christianity is the only religion in the world which historically triumphed by effecting a pure negation and reversal of a visionary world. And this occurs even in the birth of Christian art. For although that art is a continuation of classical and Hellenistic art, it only actually evolves by actually reversing that art. While there is no full Christian art until Byzantine art is far more Eastern than classical, and was itself transcended and reversed in the West by the triumphant advent of Gothic art. But early Christian art was striking not simply because of its return to a pre-classical style, but also because of its crudity and fragility. A crudity not only deriving from a loss of clarity, but more deeply from a literalization of symbolism where the symbol becomes little more than a sign. After the advent of Christianity, full painting and sculpture do not appear in the West for 1,000 years. And therefore, if only artistically, Christianity can be identified as the most powerful counter-revolution in history, and the art which it created was the highest and purest visual art which had till then been realized in the world. It is not impossible to understand Van Gogh as an inheritor of this counter-revolution, but only insofar as he embodies its opposite. And just as Van Gogh cannot be understood apart from Christianity, he also cannot be understood apart from a negation of Christianity. And this in an Hegelian sense, for this is a negation which preserves and transcends that which it negates. Above all, this is true of Van Gogh's negation of the Christian God. A negation which is certainly not a disillusion of God, but far rather a reversal of God. And most clearly a reversal of every established or manifest icon of God. As the eye of God is now truly reversed, and reversed by way of a passage into its very opposite. Hence, if we can actually see the body of God in wheat field with crows, and see that body through the very eye of God, this is an eye which is a truly reverse eye. An eye reversing that absolute light which is manifest as the primal or primordial eye of God. And reversing it so as to call forth its absolute opposite. That absolute darkness, which can only be the opposite of absolute light, and thus is the true opposite of primordial Godhead itself. While Gnosticism can know the absolute darkness of the Creator God, it cannot know the darkness of Godhead itself. That is a darkness which is only actually manifest with the birth of the modern world, a birth that is consummated in Van Gogh, where Van Gogh was the first painter fully to envision the absolute darkness of Godhead itself. I guess I should end at that point, right?